Chapter 10. Case 1. I remembered all the answers near-death experiencer Amphianda Basket. I was very much aware of my earthly life. There was no separation except that in that other dimension, I was suddenly aware of everything, all the connections, all the whys, and the answers to the whys of my former life. It's as if all this life I had been in a state of half-awareness, or amnesia, wandering around asking, who I am. Why am I? Why is this so hard? Why? And in that other realm the picture was finally complete. I got all the answers, or I remembered all the answers. And, yes, there was significant insight into others who I was in relationship with at the time, in particular, my stepmother. I was shown, or could see, her whole life, her struggles, her fears, and all that had made her into who she was. I could finally see her abusiveness was not about me being a bad kid. It was all because of her fears, her own earthly amnesia, and her struggles, insecurity, etc. I saw that she had been abused growing up. In the end, I could only feel great compassion and even admiration for her after having seen the truth of her life, her fears, etc. That she had been through so much pain, and that she bravely chose her life knowing it would be confusing and that happiness would be elusive, but that there were important people she needed to touch, and important experiences she needed to have. And I saw that it's pretty much exactly the same for all human beings on earth. We are all blind and scared while we are here. We do our best, and it's all understood and our mistakes are forgiven once we have our expanded spiritual awareness back. Case 2. No wonder. Near-death experiencer Barbara Harris Whitfield. Even though I had been an atheist for years, I felt God's love. This love was holding me. It felt incredible. There are no words in the English language, or maybe in this reality, to explain the kind of love God emanates. God was totally accepting of everything God and I reviewed in my life. In every scene of my life review I could feel again what I had felt at various times in my life. And I could feel everything that everyone else had felt as a consequence of my presence and my actions. Some of it felt good and some of it felt awful. All of this translated into knowledge, and I learned. Oh, how I learned! The information was flowing at an incredible speed that probably would have burned me up if it hadn't been for the extraordinary energy holding me. The information came in, and then love neutralized my judgments against myself. In other words, throughout every scene I viewed, information flowed through me about my perceptions and feelings, and the perceptions and feelings of every person who had shared those scenes with me. No matter how I judged myself in each interaction, being held by God was the bigger interaction. God interjected love into everything, every feeling, every bit of information about absolutely everything that went on, so that everything was all right. There was no good and no bad. There was only me and my loved ones from this life trying to survive, just trying to be. I realize now that without God holding me, I would not have had the strength to experience what I did. When it started, God and I were merging. We became one, so that I could see through God's eyes and feel through God's heart. Together, we witnessed how severely I had treated myself because that was the behavior shown and taught to me as a child. I realized that the only big mistake I had made in my 32 years of life was that I had never learned to love myself. God let me into God's experience of all this. I felt God's memories of these scenes through God's eyes. I could sense God's divine intelligence, and it was astonishing. God loves us and wants us to wake up to our real selves, to what is important. I realized that God wants us to know that we only experience real pain if we die without living first. And the way to live is to give love to ourselves and to others. It seems that we are here to learn to give and receive love. But only when we heal enough to be real can we understand and give and receive love the way love was meant to be. When God holds us in our life reviews and we merge into one, we remember this feeling as being limitless. God is limitless. God's capacity to love is never ending. God's love for us never changes, no matter how we are. God doesn't judge us either. During our life review, we judge ourselves by feeling the love we have created in others' lives. We also feel the pain we have caused in others' lives. This may be a kind of cosmic equalizer. I did not see an old man with a white beard who sits in judgment of us. I only felt limitless divine love. God only gives. God interjected love into all the scenes of my life to show me God's reality. And the most amazing part of all is that God held nothing back. I understood all that God understood. God let me in. God shared all of God's self with me, all the qualities of gentleness and openness, and all the gifts, including our own empowerment and peace. I never knew that much loving intelligence and freedom could exist. At this point, God and I were merging into one sacred person. It felt as though I lifted off the circle bed and we went to the baby I was seeing to my upper left in the darkness. Picture the baby being in a bubble. That bubble was in the center of a cloud of thousands and thousands of bubbles. In each bubble was another scene from my life. As we moved toward the baby, it was as though we were bobbing through the bubbles. At the same time, there was a linear sequence in which we relived 32 years of my life. I could hear myself saying, "No wonder, no wonder." I now believe my "no wonders" meant, "No wonder you are the way you are now. Look what was done to you when you were a little girl." My mother had been dependent on prescription drugs, angry and abusive, and my father wasn't home much of the time and did little to intervene. I saw all this again, but I did not see it in little bits and pieces, the way I had remembered it as an adult. I saw and experienced it just as I had lived it at the time it first happened. Not only was I me, I was also my mother, my dad, and my brother. We were all one. Just as I had felt everything my grandmother had felt, I now felt my mother's pain and neglect from her childhood. She wasn't trying to be mean. She didn't know how to be loving or kind. She didn't know how to love. She didn't understand what life is really all about. And she was still angry from her own childhood, angry because they were poor and because her father was sick almost every day until he died when she was 11. And then she was angry because he had left her. She didn't know what to do with her anger, so she gave it to my brother and me. Her anger boiled up all the time, and then she physically abused us as she made us listen to all her resentments. Her list went back to her early childhood. Everyone had hurt her. I don't think that she, through her numbness and drugged state, understood how she was doing the same thing to us. Everything came flooding back, including my father's helplessness and confusion at stopping the insanity. I could hear myself saying, "No wonder, no wonder." And then the benevolent energy that was holding me held me tighter and with even more love. We continued watching my mother in pain, always seeing doctors and always receiving prescription painkillers, sleeping pills and tranquilizers. My only feeling during this time was loneliness. I saw myself down on my knees by the side of my bed, praying for a doctor to help my mother. I saw how I had given up myself in order to survive. I forgot that I was a child. I became my mother's mother. I suddenly knew that my mother had had the same thing happen to her in her childhood. She took care of her father, and as a child she gave herself up to take care of him. As children, she and I both became anything and everything others needed. As my life review continued, I also saw my mother's soul, how painful her life was, how lost she was. And I saw my father and how he put blinders on himself to avoid his grief over my mother's pain and to survive. In my life review, I saw that they were good people caught in helplessness. I saw their beauty, their humanity and their needs that had gone unattended to in their own childhoods. I loved them and understood them. We may have been trapped, but we were still souls connected in our dance of life by an energy source that had created us. This was when I first realized that we do not end at our skin. We are all in this big churning mass of consciousness. We are each a part of this consciousness we call God. And we are not just human. We are spirit. We were spirit before we came into this lifetime. We are all struggling spirits now, trying to get being human right. And when we leave here, we will be pure spirit again. As my life review continued, I got married and had my own children and saw that I was on the edge of repeating the cycle that I had experienced as a child. I was on prescription drugs. I was in the hospital. I was becoming like my mother. And at the same time, this loving energy we call God was holding me and let me into its experience of all this. I felt God's memories of these scenes through God's eyes, just as I had through my grandmother's eyes. As my life unfolded, I witnessed how severely I had treated myself because that was the behavior shown and taught to me as a child. I realized that the only big mistake I had made in my life was that I had never learned to love myself. And then I was back here, in this reality. Case 3. There is nothing to forgive. Asterisk near death experiencer Anita Murjani. I felt not only that I was loved unconditionally, it was like I just was loved just because I existed, no other reason. I also felt unconditional love for everyone and everything, even for people that may have hurt me during my life. All I felt for them was unconditional love and compassion and a knowing that no matter what they did, even if they hurt me really badly, they were still doing the best they knew how at the time. It was like I understood why they did what they did. That feeling of unconditional love is not even a feeling of forgiveness towards those that hurt you, it's beyond forgiveness. It's like I understand why you did what you did, and therefore there is nothing to even forgive. Because when I understand you, to me it means you haven't even done anything wrong. To forgive someone means to say you've done something wrong and I forgive you for it. There's a judgment there. There was no judgment. It's almost like having walked a mile in their shoes. It's a knowing that if I was in your shoes, I would have done the same, so there's nothing to forgive. That's the kind of feeling of unconditional love. In that realm, this was all I could feel for everyone, and that was what I felt surrounded with. I encountered my father who had passed away 10 years before, and my best friend Soni, who had passed away 2 years prior to that, and I was also surrounded by other beings who I didn't recognize. But all I felt from them was this unconditional love, as though they were there purely to help me, to guide me, help me through this transition. Soulmate, this is a part of Zindagi Ki Roshni Consultancy. It has been established for those who have lost someone and for those who are very sad in their life. About 100 PDF books and 20 short audio books of this topic will be sent to those who join it. This data will be sent to their email or WhatsApp. If you want to join this organization, then please send WhatsApp message to this number.